This research is a collaboration with my research team. Consists of myself, Professor Yasheng Chen from Simon Fraser University, and also Tota Panggabean from the same university. So this research is tried to investigate the relation between visual attention and how it affects decision quality. And based on the knowledge that we learned from this research, we tried to develop a training program and decision aid that that use the feed-forward learning approach in order to help managers, particularly those that are inexperienced novice managers, so that they don't make mistakes, but they can improve their decision quality. Just to give you some ideas about our research settings, it is a laboratory experiment, and we do have a computer lab where we invite managers to come and then they perform their the experimental tasks. So they need to wear these eyeglasses. Oops. They need to wear the eyeglasses, and then we capture everything, all their activities, what information they look at, and how long they spend on a certain aspect of that particular information. And we want to understand whether the time they spend, their search strategy, also affect their decision. So the basic idea of this research is very simple. It is based on the well-known performance measurement framework. So the notion is that for companies, if they want to measure their managers or their employees, they have to be very, very careful of what variables they want to use. Because if you measure the wrong variables, then you are going to get the wrong result. Right? I give you an example. In my class, I think participation is very important. And I want students to be part of this learning process. I think that's the better way to teach my student. So in order to achieve this objective, of course I need to measure participation, right? On the other hand, if I measure attendance, then student will come, sit nicely, smile, say nothing, right? What do I get? I don't get their participation. So the idea is that we have to be very careful in determining what variables we want to use to measure the performance of our managers or our employees. Because what is important needs to be measured. And when we measure something, it gets to be accomplished, right? If you measure participation, people will come regularly, say nothing, all right? Now, a good performance measurement and evaluation system, if the managers or employees perform well, then we need to reward them. Not necessarily monetary, maybe a pat in the back is enough, but that's just reinforce the notion that they have done a good job, and then they will think, hey, I've done a really good job, I have accomplished my target, then I will do it in the future. Then the circle goes on and on. So that's basically the notion that we try to promote in this research. Now, unfortunately, talking about performance measurement, many companies still rely on these very common measures. For example, a return on investment. Right? Basically, this measure tells you how much profit the company has generated based on the total investment they have made. Or another measure, return on equity. How much profit you have generated based on the shareholders' money that we use in our company. Right? It's very common, it's very simple, easy to understand. That's why it's easy to compare. If there are 2-3 companies, then we can compare their return on investment or return on equity very easily. Then we can determine which company performed better. Right? So that's the strength of these measures. However, there are some drawbacks. The first one is this measure primarily use financial aspect. And we know financial is not the only thing for companies to survive. There are many other non-financial aspects that we need to pay attention to. For example, customer satisfaction, right? It's non-financial, but it is important. If we don't satisfy our customers, then we don't have future business, okay? Another thing, employee turnover, for example. Maybe we have a high turnover, and it's very costly. Although turnover is not measured in terms of money, but it is also eventually will affect the company's financial performance. Another aspect of this business is focus too much on historical activities. Why we get high profit now? Because we did well in the past, right? But this current success does not guarantee future survival. Another disadvantage is the lack of predictive power. We cannot predict the future as compared to, for example, if you train your employee well, then you can predict that in the future your company will be better off, right? Because your employees' skills are updated, they can cope well with this ever-changing business environment. The last one is reward wrong behavior. Think about return on investment. If you don't train your employees, actually you improve your bottom line, right? Because you don't incur these expenses. Then you reward wrong behavior. You said, hey, you did a good job by not training your employees. Indirectly, of course you don't say that. But you see, because you improve the bottom line. So to overcome this problem, the weaknesses of traditional performance measures, many companies nowadays have incorporated this balance scorecard. The basic idea is the balance scorecard incorporate both lead and lag variables. Lead variables are variables that you do now that will benefit the companies in the future. For example, research and development. If you do it now, maybe you will suffer in the short term in terms of the bottom line, right? But in the future, you will better survive. The basic notion of this balance scorecard is that companies have to incorporate not just financial, but also non-financial aspect of their business. When you look at here, the first one is financial aspect. It's still financial, is still important, but it's not the only one. That's the main message here. Financial is basically tells you whether you have satisfied the requirement of your shareholders. Okay. You also have to consider customer perspective. How well you satisfy the expectation, the needs of your customers. How well you perform your day-to-day activities, how you excel, improve the efficiency, for example, in terms of internal business processes. And the fourth one here is how you can sustain your ability to innovate, to be able to meet the changing demand of the business and also the customers. So just to give you a brief idea, this is like a one semester lecture, but I just give you a basic idea. The balance scorecard eventually will ask companies to determine what are the key performance indicators. So when you look at the process of developing this system, then companies will start with their mission and vision. They look at the strategy and then determine what are the specific measures they want to use in order to realize, to achieve this vision and mission. Now, I used to work as a business consultant, and every time I show this strategy map, in general, they are excited because they can see now the relationship between all these variables that they are going to measure and eventually how all these variables will maximize the stakeholders' value. Just look at an example of this green arrow here. Let's say the learning and growth component or perspective. This one is how much you spend on activities in training your employees, in motivating your employees to share their knowledge, right? Down here, maybe companies or even lower level managers, they don't see how these activities will eventually benefit the company as a whole, because they're quite far from the level here. So if you train your employees, then maybe next month you are going to improve the efficiency of your operation, right? If you improve your efficiency, then you will be able to lower your price, you will be able to increase the quality of your product, and then you'll see it will increase the growth of your revenue, and of course, eventually, we expect that, hey, the return on investment will increase, right? But it's not the only one. That's the main message here. Financial is not the only one. Companies also need to have a more balanced approach in measuring performance. Now, when you look at the balanced scorecard, it is quite comprehensive, quite complicated, right? So when you look at this diagram here, this is a traditional one. Then they introduce balanced scorecard, but balanced scorecard is not without a problem. And that's the focus of our research. Actually, balanced scorecard, companies that use balanced scorecard, they suffer what is coined as common measure bias. So when managers are overwhelmed with all these measures, on average, companies that use balanced scorecard, usually they have about 16 to 20 different measures. So it's very complicated, right? And when you are overwhelmed with all this detail and all these measures, what do you do? Usually you go back to your comfort zone, which is unfortunately the common measure, like the financial measures, because they are more familiar with these measures. So why the common measure bias happen? Because of the lack of attention to the unique measures or to the lead variables, to the variables that are unique to the companies or to the business unit. We know that business unit that use a different strategy, they have a different key success factors, right? I'll show you later. So the main theme of our research is attention. Now I give you an example. There are two distinct business unit strategy. When you look at here, the first one is cost leadership. Think about Huawei, or I was thinking about maybe Fair Price, where I think their slogan is low price and more, right? So it's very clear that they use lower cost leadership strategy. What is their main competitive weapon? So here, of course, they need to save cost. They need to be very efficient, low price, and usually this type of company achieve a very high standardization. They produce standardized product, commodity products. Think about Huawei. I don't know whether this is correct or not. But both strategy, remember, both strategy can be very successful. Okay, look at Fair Price. It's very successful, right? I was about to compare between Fair Price and cold storage. I tried to justify whether this is right or not, but I decided to use this. I think this is more obvious. So I believe this company use cost leadership strategy. So these are possibly their unique measures. Well, a differentiation, think about Apple. Apple, they always come up with new products, and probably their unique measures should be how much revenue they generate from their new products that has been introduced in the last 3 years, for example, or even in the last years. Now, Apple introduced their product very fastly, very quickly, right? Number of patents that they are granted by the government, R&D, research and development expenditures, or how many design changes based on their previous product. So you see, it's a very different competitive weapon, very different key success factors, right? And as I mentioned, sometimes these unique measures, managers are not familiar with. That's why they go back to their comfort zone, which is the common measures. And you see, both strategies can use the same measures, what we call common measures, right? Return on investment, earning per share, market share, or employee turnover, all are common to any business units. And usually these common measures are not as important as the unique measures. So what is attention? Remember our main focus is attention, right? So what is attention? According to Kahneman, he won the Nobel Prize some time ago, I think in I don't remember exactly. But actually what he said is we have a limited capacity. Our brain has a limited capacity. So attention is the process of allocating our limited capacity into a certain stimuli. And in order to process that information effectively, we basically have to ignore some other information. Now I just found this picture here. It's kind of interesting. Let's say you want to learn guitar, right? I know Nick learned guitar. So he wants to learn guitar, and he searched for the internet, how to learn guitar. Then he will find a lot of different things, maybe about barbecue, go to picnic. In order to focus his attention on learning guitar, he has to ignore some of this information, right? Especially these days with all this social media, it's very difficult to focus. There are a lot of distractions. Now, in order to process for students, in order to process information, learn more effectively, try to ignore. Maybe sometimes it's a good idea to turn off your cell phone, right? Not you are wired 24 hours, 7 days a week. Anyway, there have been some previous research in this area. And basically what they did is they look at they give some input. For example, they vary the presentation formats. Maybe information about learning guitar, right, in terms of pictures, a graph, or just basic information. And then they observe the output. And then they infer from the output that this input affect the output. But we are not satisfied with that because previous research basically treat the process, the cognitive process, as a black box. They just assume that people will attend, for example, all the information available and then make decisions based on those assumptions. While our research try to understand the process, how managers actually process information when they are provided with multiple performance measures in this case. So we use this theory, which is the theory of attention. Basically, this theory tells us that attention has two components. The first one is how informative the information is, or the stimuli is, and then how the stimuli is being presented, or the salience. What is the perceptual features? Can be in terms of color, text, graph, size, or where you place this information. All right, so these two then will determine how much attention you will put to a certain stimuli. And according to this line of research, you can measure the attention based on your eye movement and how long you spend on a certain, what we call the area of interest. And then this attention will eventually affect your decision. Now, our basic research design is that first thing, we want to measure whether if you do understand your goal, because informativeness, when you look at here, informativeness is very much influenced by the goal. Let's say the goal is to come here, right? Then you use your GPS to search for information. Maybe it will give you information about a gas station, about restaurant. They are not related to your goal. They are still stimuli, but they are not related to your goal. Okay? So you are not going to pay attention to that type of stimuli. But if it is about what road you need to do, what is the traffic light, what is the shortest distance to come here, right? Then it is related to your goal to come here, and that's informative. Okay. On the other hand, then what is the format of this information? Maybe it's a bright color, and those also will affect the attention. Okay. So basically, the first idea is that, or in research term, the first hypothesis is that I try to stay away from this research terminology as much as possible. So the first one is, we are interested in how the goal affects the attention, and the second one, how the presentation format also affects the attention, and then eventually attention to the unique measures in this case, and then eventually the decision quality. The second stage is we are also interested in the search pattern. The advantage of using this eye tracking is you can track the pattern of their search strategy. And we observe a very different pattern between experienced manager and inexperienced managers. So we learn from this research that, I'll tell you later, but it's a very different search strategy that they use. So based on this knowledge, now we are trying to develop a training program so that we can teach these novice managers so they don't need to make mistakes or learn from feedback, but learn from this feed-forward research strategy. So we have 60 managers, and interestingly, 38 are female and only 22 male. So in Vancouver area, I don't know whether this is a good representation of the population, but there are more female managers in Vancouver area than male managers. So average working experience 10 years, and we randomly assign into these 3 different categories. So group 1, basically we just give them the participants a very concise explanation about the strategy and the link between strategy and performance measures. The second group is we add more information with examples, for example, with more narration. And then the third one about the graph. So you can immediately see basically this presentation format represent the salience, while these 2 measures represent the goal. If they do understand the goals, then they are going to put more attention to the to the unique measure. Sorry. Okay. So what is the manipulation? That is a little bit of research. So you'll see we have 2 versions of our experimental materials. The first one is we designed a measure where all the unique measures of strategic business unit A outperform the unique measure of strategic unit B, and vice versa for the common measure. So if the managers pay more attention to the unique measures, then they should, the decision is how strongly you will promote these managers. So the decision is if they pay more attention to these unique measures, they should promote business unit A manager, right? If they suffer the common measure problem, then they will promote the business unit B managers. See. On the other hand, the opposite is true for the second version. So we want to see and compare whether they experience these common measures and how different they are in terms of experienced and inexperienced managers. So the result is interesting. When you look at here, remember the theory said that actually these 2, which is the goal, the informativeness, and the salience, the presentation format, should have a significant influence on attention. On the other hand, we found that actually presentation format doesn't matter, particularly for the experienced managers. So it's kind of interesting. So we found it's not significantly related to how much attention they put on the unique measures, but the decision quality is significantly influenced by the amount of attention they pay to these unique measures. Now, in terms of information search strategy, we find that goal awareness, again, dominate, is significant, and more experienced managers use directive strategy. So directive strategy looks like this is one of the performance measures. You see, if we present this to the inexperienced managers, the way they search is they look from number 1, and then they go to number 2, number 3, number 4, and they go sequentially based on the way the information is presented to them. And we randomly assign these measures, so it's not always like this. And we keep observing this sequential search strategy for inexperienced managers. On the other hand, for the more experienced managers, then they will see this LC is like a link common, LU is link unit, unique. So you'll see managers, experienced managers will go from LU, for example, then they will jump to LU here, they will jump to another LU here, and they'll go to another LU here. So they search information that are consistent with the goal that they have learned from before, from the stage before, while inexperienced managers go sequentially. And you can intuitively say that this sequential search strategy is not very efficient, right? Because now you have to go over all these less important measures, and then you spend more time on this less important aspect of the business. So it's kind of interesting, and as you see, this is a typical balance scorecard. It's not an easy measure. It's very complicated. That's why it's very easy that managers go back to the common measure bias. And the way we measure is we can, statistically, we can measure the correlation between the way information is presented and the way they search the information. So we compare between the correlation coefficient of information presentation and information search. Then we can determine whether they use sequential or they use directive information search. And the result is, when you look at here, if you pay more attention to the unique measures, then it is more likely that you are going to make a better decision. The same thing happened to this search strategy. If you make more directive or the correlation is lower between the presentation sequence and the search strategy, then you make a better decision. So, what we learned from these studies? Novice managers, they have difficulties in understanding the link between strategy. Remember I showed you before, all the KPI, the key performance indicators, are derived from the company's strategy and vision and mission, right? So here, for novice managers, those that have less than 2 years of working experience, they have difficulties really to understand what is the link between this company strategy and all these measures. While more experienced, what we call expert managers, they have a high level of understanding of the link. The second one is novice managers tend to be influenced by what we call perceptual feature-driven search. So if you change the presentation format, then they're going to change their level of strategy. So they're being influenced by how you present that information to them. Whether it is very detailed or you use some graph, then their decision is going to be influenced by the presentation format. On the other hand, here, for expert managers, they are very knowledge-driven. So they know the link between strategy and the measure, and they go directly to the unique measures. So they use the directive search strategy. What is the main takeaway? Our research show that in accounting we call it substance over form, right? So for knowledge managers, they do rely more on their knowledge about the company strategy, the link between the strategy and the measures, and they do search information related to their knowledge. And those strategy, of course, improve their decision processes. Another takeaway is now we can learn, it's not just the black box. Remember I told you the black box. But we can move from the black box to transparency. Now we do understand why different managers make different decisions, because they process information differently. Right? In the past, we always assume if we provide a lot of information, people will attend to that information and we will process all the information. Our research told us, informed us that that's not the case, especially for experienced managers. Yes, it is true for the novice managers, but it's not true for the more experienced managers, because they selectively process the information provided to them. So that's why for students, it's good to learn, right? When you learn, then you can filter information better, and you can make a better decision. So this is what next, what we are trying to do now. We gain this knowledge. We try to develop a training program based on the scan path of these experts. So we classify our sample into expert and novice, and then we compare their search strategy, their scan path, the way they move their eyes, and then we are going to use this to train novice managers, especially for companies that use multiple measures. It's very complicated, so that we don't have to have a very costly practice. For example, in the past, usually we ask them to do, and then when they make mistake, then we can make a corrective action. But sometimes it's very costly, right? They already make mistake. Why don't we prevent these mistakes by informing them, this is the way experts behave. And you know, if you follow this practice, you don't need to make mistake, or at least you can minimize the potential mistake that you will make in the future. So this is what we call a feed-forward approach. So provide training, train based on expert information, make sure that they do understand the link between the strategy and the performance measures before we let them do their job. Otherwise, then we'll suffer this feedback loop system where they make mistake and it incurs so much cost, and then they can make the corrective action. So these are some benefits of this feed-forward learning. The first one is we can increase judgment accuracy. If they can quickly learn how experts behave, how experts search and process information, then they can increase their judgment accuracy. They can make better decisions. The second one is expedite decision-making processes. Of course, now you don't have to go sequentially in order to understand all this information. You can jump directly to the more important information and spend more time on those aspects. Increase decision quality, and of course, free up your cognitive capacity, right? So now you can filter better, and you can use your brain more effectively. So what is for JCU? I'm glad that our leader is here. So this is just a simple example. Let's say our strategic intent is to creating a brighter future in the tropics worldwide through graduate and discoveries that make a difference. Okay, so I just highlight discovery. Let's say we want to focus on discovery. Of course, we can focus on graduates, but this is just an example. Discoveries. And then discoveries is translated into a belief that we recognize that knowledge has the power to change the lives, right? So then, based on this knowledge, now we have to think about, remember the balance scorecard, right? Start from strategy, and then you look at the strategic objective, what is your belief, and how we are going to measure this in a concrete way. So I believe, I just come up with some ideas. Let's say for us, in terms of knowledge, then the unique measures might be number of publication, how many citations we get from our papers, how innovative our teaching approach, so students can benefit from that. This is the related to knowledge. Of course, we can also use some common measures to measure the success of our university, right? In terms of net profit or return on investment or other common measures. Now, I give you an example. Let's say we have two big departments here, business and psychology, right? Business, maybe business is easier, I don't know. I don't have the financial figures, but maybe business is easier to achieve these common measures, right? Because we can charge, for example, premium tuition, for example. In Canada, we do that. Business, we charge much, much higher tuition than other departments, right? But probably we don't generate much of publication, or our paper is not cited well in the literature. We teach a very basic knowledge, and we don't have an innovative business teaching approach, right? Because they're so technical and something like that. On the other hand, psychology, they might not be able to generate a lot of profit, right? But they have a lot of publication, high number of citation, a very innovative teaching approach because they understand the personality of students, this kind of aspect. So they perform really well in these unique measures, but probably perform a bit poorly in the common measures. Now the question is, if I'm the top management here, which managers should I promote? Which one do you think? Is that psychology, the dean of psychology department, or the dean of business? It's a hard question, right? It's not easy. Business is very profitable, and well, many people will say this is a very successful department, although they suffer from these unique measures, which are more consistent with our strategic intent to make a difference, right? To create knowledge, while psychology perform well in that direction. So I leave that up to the leaders. There's no answer for that. And that's all I have to say this evening. I will be very happy to entertain any questions you have. I hope we have learned something from this research, and we are very excited. This is in a very early stage, and we hope now we are doing several different projects. I have 2 PhD students now in Canada. They are doing like a follow-up studies. We are looking at, for example, how different compensation system might affect the way people learn. There are so many different aspects of this research that we are very excited to do this. And hopefully we can benefit the business society. For example, these things, we can develop a training program or decision aids that can be very useful for companies that use these multiple performance measures. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you have.